The cloud computing industry is expected to hit $600 billion in 2024. That's a lot. And what that means is a lot of your data that currently is in-house or on-prem is going to be moving to the cloud. And what that means is an expanded attack surface. So that's why we're taking a look specifically, IBM's X-Force research group, at what is the cloud threat landscape. What are some of the things that we're using to determine that? Well, this is our 5th year of doing this report, so we've got a lot of experience with this. And some of the areas that we're using to draw our conclusions are threat intelligence reports. We have a lot of access to information about what's going on the global internet, and we use that information in this report. Some other things, IBM's X-Force team is called in to do penetration tests. So we learn things from those penetration tests. Where are particular weaknesses? We also do incident response, planning, and the emergency response services that go along with that. When the companies call up and say, hey, our hair is on fire, where's the fire extinguisher? So we try to help figure out those kinds of things. And those incidents also inform this. And then also we look at a thing called the dark web, which is essentially a part of the web that most people never see. And it's an area where a lot of hackers hang out and they discuss things, and we like to sit in and listen on what they're discussing. Okay, let's take a look at what some of the key takeaways and recommendations were from that report. Well, number 1 on the list is actually not a new one. It's been around for a good long time, but it came in at 27% of the newly discovered common vulnerabilities and exposures. And it's something called cross-site scripting. Cross-site scripting, like I said, is not new. It's been around for a couple of decades, but it's still hurting us. How does that work? Well, here's the short version. If you've got a website and a bad guy is able to insert, let's say in the comments section, he's able to put in a link, and that link contains some additional code, maybe some JavaScript. That's the insertion that's happening here. And he's putting that in to the website. Another guy comes along and reads that and clicks on the link. Once he clicks on the link, now this content is running on him. It wasn't content supplied by the website, it was content supplied by the bad guy. And what can that do? Well, a number of bad things. For instance, one of the things it can do is hijack his session by allowing the bad guy to take his session tokens and then control the session from that point forward. Another thing that can happen is he can be redirected off to some other sketchy website and not realize that, in fact, he's even left this one. It could do a lot of other things, like making this site even look different to him than what it should be. It could implant malware on his system. A lot of different things that could happen, really bad stuff. And we're seeing this continue. There are a lot of things that we can do, and I'll talk about at the end of the video, that will help prevent that. All right, our number 2 takeaway from the report also was the second most impactful in terms of it being seen in terms of vulnerabilities, and that is stolen credentials, compromised credentials. Basically, think passwords. And it turns out this was 20% of the incidents that we found. So that's a lot. And what we saw in particular that was concerning in this trend is when our X-Force researchers looked on the dark web, which is sort of considered a marketplace where a lot of bad guys are hanging out, and they are buying and selling credentials and all sorts of things like that. And we observed that the cost of credentials, average cost of these, went down 13% in the last 2 years. Well, that means if it's cheaper to buy passwords, then it's going to be easier for the bad guys to buy more of them. It's going to be easier for them to log in than it is to hack in. And that is, in fact, what we've seen. Now, another way to look at this is as cost of those credentials goes down, if we move over here to this side, then the threat level, in fact, is going up. So that's what we've seen so far. What we want to see, though, is a turn in this. Maybe I can't go make the cost of these credentials more expensive, but what I could do is do the opposite, make them worthless, drive them to zero. Then, in fact, I could make the threat go down if these were, in fact, worthless. How could I do that? Well, one way that I could drive it in that direction is multi-factor authentication. That means a password alone will not get you into this system. So therefore, having a password is not really as valuable as it used to be. So that's going to cause the value of passwords to go down. Another thing that would really help here is the use of passkeys. And I've got a video, 2 videos where I talk about these passkeys. They basically eliminate passwords and therefore make their value absolutely zero. So people that want to buy and sell these things would be selling useless commodities. That is a potential way for us to go to counteract this particular threat. So let's dissect that last one that I just talked about. I said it's stolen credentials that are creating a lot of problems for us. How are people actually stealing those credentials? What are the main ways that they're doing it? Well, it turns out there are 2 main classes of attacks that are accounting for a large number of these: phishing and business email compromise. Let's talk a little bit about what those are. In fact, phishing accounted for 33% of the incidents where we were dealing with this, and business email compromise, 39%. Now, hopefully you're familiar with this. You may not be as familiar with this, so let's talk a little bit about what the differences in these are. In a phishing attack, generally speaking, we're trying to target a whole lot of people. So it's not just a single person, although there are spear phishing attacks where we try to target a narrow subset of people, but it's still usually not just from going after one person. However, in the case of business email compromise, these tend to be going after just one person. And in most cases, it's someone in the C-suite, someone who's like a CEO, a CIO, a CFO, someone who's really in a position where if I were able to get their account, I'd be able to do a lot of damage. And it's a case where I send them an email. It's very highly tailored to their specific information, so it becomes very, very believable. So that's one of the big differences between these 2. In both of these, there's an element of deception, obviously. This is, and with phishing, we're dealing with typically fake websites where I send you a link and then you're going to go to a site that looks like what the real one is but isn't, and then I'm going to collect your credentials when you try to log in. That's one way to do it. Or I send you an attachment of some sort, and then you open the attachment, maybe it puts malware on your system, and then from that, the next time you go to log in with a keystroke logger, I'm able to get your information. That's called an info stealer. So I can get whatever it is you type in. In these situations, I'm dealing more with impersonation. Impersonation attacks now are going to do something where I'm going to say, let's say I am the CFO and I'm sending an email to the CEO, so the chief financial officer sending an email to the CEO or one of the first lieutenants, one of the people that works for the CEO, and I'm saying, hey, this is me, your employee, trusted. Here, I need the following information. I need you to log in and approve this particular thing, something along those lines. So it's a very specific targeted impersonation attack. In both of these cases, there's an element of social engineering. So that's what we have to look at. This is how the bad guys are getting in. Now you've seen what the problems are. What can we do about it? What are the recommendations? Well, the first relates to cross-site scripting. And the first couple of things I'm going to refer to are really for website developers. And that is looking at something that nobody likes to do, and it's the hard work of validating all the inputs. That is, I've got to look at everything that comes into an input field and make sure that it doesn't, for instance, include a script, because that's where people should be, say, typing in comments, typing in their name, their email address. I don't expect executable code there. But if I don't check explicitly for it, then someone could put that in and then someone else comes along later and it does damage. Another thing I want to do is encode outputs. And this one is more for web developers to understand what the HTML encodings are for special characters. I'm going to go over these things in more detail in another video on cross-site scripting, so look for that. But these are things that developers can do. And another thing that end users should be careful about is when you see links on websites, especially if the links are in comment sections or in areas where other people might be able to put things in. Don't just click on those links. That could be a bad deal. That could be an injection attack where someone has injected scripting code that is going to take over your system or do other sorts of things that you don't want to have happen. So be careful on that sort of thing. The other one deals with credentials. As I mentioned, the other big takeaway was about stolen credentials. And I talked a little bit about what some of the things that we can do about this are. It's the usual. It's multi-factor authentication, which causes us to not depend so much on passwords, which are things that are not very secure to begin with, because users choose bad ones, and they can in fact be shared, bought, and stolen, and things like that. Passkeys, as I've mentioned, are a good option here as well. Those cannot easily be bought and sold and things like that. They're going to stay on the device. They're cryptographically strong. So that's going to cause us to not be using the same kind of credentials that we've used in the past. And they are, by the way they are designed, generally phishing resistant, which is another bonus for that. And then we need to do a lot better job of training end users. Our job never stops here. It's not just a once a year, here's your 1 hour of security training. We need to keep reinforcing these messages so that it becomes part of the DNA for every user in the system. They don't have to understand the details of what these things are, but they need to understand we don't do this kind of stuff, and we take advantage of these things when we have them. So that, if you want to see more, and there's a lot more detail in this report, please go take a look at the report, download that, and learn what you can to protect yourself as you move into the cloud environment.